Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be working on Rick Wilson's Snickers car from 1991, and it's a Monogram Skill 3. Um, as you see on the box here, it shows the chassis is painted a light gray, as most of their chassis are, but the model instructions call it for red, so we're going to be doing red. And this particular model, we're going to be trying to use much spray cans or spray bombs as possible. And I want to do a video on trying to paint on the sprues and using spray cans. So here we go. So like always, we want to prep the model as best as we can before paint because paint doesn't hide too much. And here I'm sanding down the holes that are visible. I don't want them visible, so I fill those in with putty. That's off video, but yeah, I fill them in with putty and sand them down as best as possible. So again, let's sand everything down. Spray cans or any type of paint usually does not fill too much, so we want to get everything looking as good as we can before we paint. So I already tested another piece of plastic from this model, and the paint adheres directly to the plastic without priming. So I tested that. You want to probably test your paint with plastic before you try this too. And I try to get all the hard parts first. So it's hard with spray cans, but this is the point of this video, is to show how I spray things with spray cans. And as you can see, it may look sloppy, but the end result is pretty good. Keep in mind with spray cans, you want to keep the can moving as fast as possible because the paint has such a high velocity and it's basically exploding out of there. So you want to keep that can moving as quick as possible. If you keep it in one spot, you'll get very quick paint buildup, and we don't want that. You want, if you're going to use spray cans, you gotta keep it as minimal layers as possible. So I try to do all the hard parts first and try to keep the color light, or the first couple layers light, and you can always build up, but it's really hard to take excess paint off. Remember too, with colors like red, you will need a few coats, and this is now the second coat. And I anticipate on giving this one more coat after this. So again, keep your coats light, and it just turns out better if you build up the layers rather than making a mistake of adding way too much paint. Then you almost just got to strip the paint off and start over again. If you're wondering also why I did the interior red, the instructions do call red, and a quick Google search shows that this car did come red. So that's why I went ahead and did the chassis and everything red. I painted the gold right onto the chrome rims. Some people would dechrome these first, but with a metallic like this, I just rolled the dice and painted them directly gold, and it turned out very nice. The plan with this model is to try to paint everything first and then let it sit for a couple days because it is an enamel. It does need some time to gas off and start working on the body. And here you can see I attempt many times to put this front clip on, and with older kits it's tricky. There's no real pins or guidelines or proper recesses, so you want to try to get this lined up the first time as close as possible to prevent further sanding. It's inevitable with this model. I did have to put filler and putty and sand it quite 3 or 4 layers. So I glued on the front clip and the rear bumper and proceeded to do as much body work as possible before I laid any paint onto this, and that even means primer. I wanted everything smooth, and then when I felt everything was smooth, I gave it a coat of primer and went at it a couple more times until it was near perfect. I just used your standard green squadron putty and built it up in layers, knowing I will have to sand it down a few times after. Now you can see the body's primed and it's getting ready for the paint. And I jumped to do the body in between because all the other parts that I painted are drying now. It's way easier to use spray bombs, yes, but you're waiting longer to do your model unless you have a way to cure it, and I do not at this time. Once I'm satisfied with the connection or how smooth I want it, I proceed to priming it again and then get ready for the white, and I just use a bright white satin spray bomb. It's always good to try to keep your coats light and spray the hardest parts to reach first. I mean, those are the easiest parts to forget, and I suggest always going for them first. After a few days of letting all the parts dry, I proceeded to sand all the edges down and start connecting the parts that I needed to according to the instructions. Remember to always have your gluing edges clean of paint, otherwise your contact will be minimal. You always want to have the best possible connection for your plastics, so that means remove your paint on both surfaces and make it so you could see the original color. So once I scrape off red and I see white, I know I have bare plastic ready to glue, and that's how you get the optimal connection. And because everything's already painted, I tried to avoid using plastic cements such as Tamiya or Ambroid, anything or Plastruct. So when I put this model together, I used CA, and that's what's spread out on that card in the middle of the screen. There's when it's ready to install parts, I put a blob of CA on that card, and I attach basically how many parts I can at the in that time. And here I'm painting up some details using the brush paint. I know I'm sorry I said spray bombs only, but I didn't want to mask those little lines on the fuel cell, and you know, everybody should have some sort of aluminum paint if you're building a model. So take the time and just do some detailing here, and it pays in the end. I mean, you could leave everything one solid color, but I suggest detailing what you can. And going back to earlier, the reason why I don't or avoid using plastic cements is because I noticed when the self-contained brush touches an enamel paint, even if it's a couple days cured, it will catch some of that paint. And when you put it back in your glue bottle, you'll notice, say for example, you touch red, your glue all of a sudden is red. So everything you glue in the future has a tinge of red to it. So to avoid that, I just don't even use it and stick to CA. So here I'm gluing a couple more things on the interior, and I start gluing pieces as they get detailed up to where I need them to be. I put them in. So you can see the fuel cells in now, even though it's accessible. That's what I try to do, is detail apart as much as I can in hand, like this shift knob. You know, I paint it in hand rather than trying to glue it in and paint it in there, which is just doesn't make sense. So yeah, paint it in hand, get it detailed to where you want it, and install it. Now here I'm lowering the car, and I'm just gonna go over that in another video because that's not necessary here. But I'm clipping the spindles off and lowering it. So that's what that was about. At some point earlier in this model or later, I made a mistake and it's not shown on camera, but I just want to let you guys know that in some models you can leave the engine out and then install or install later on, but in this model you have to put the engine in before the dash goes in because that engine won't fit with the dash piece in there. So keep that in mind. It might even be the firewall, but I don't think it's the firewall. I'm pretty sure it's the dash piece. So when you're putting this together and it says put the engine in, make sure you got it detailed up and put it in because it won't go in after that dash. It just doesn't fit. So I thought I'd mention that too. As mentioned earlier too, I just put some CA or super glue on that card and apply it with a toothpick. That way you're keeping uh, runs and etc. to a minimum. So jumping ahead a little bit now, you can see the engine's in and basically the underside is done. And I'm just touching up with some, to me, a flat black where I feel it needs to be. I also installed the springs or the shocks, sorry, and painted them yellow. I know the many instructions say to paint them aluminum, but these are Bilstein shocks and they're usually baby blue and yellow. So I always try to add that feature somehow and paint my shocks yellow. And again, here you can see the engine dash and pretty much the interior is complete. And I'm just adding some front, I think the fan was going on here. And for the wheels, if anybody's wondering, I painted the edges white. I just basically used the brush I'm using now with some white and held it on an angle and just touched the top of the Goodyear. So that's the easiest way to paint them. I I might do a video on how I've stamped them in the past. And here you can see I'm actually gluing the wheels on, and that's the final wheel going on. So let's spin around the completed chassis now and look at the underside. And again, with those wheels, if you're painting them and you get some paint on the edge, I suggest using a white acrylic, because if you miss a spot, you can quickly dab your paintbrush in water, have a spare one handy, and wipe off the excess. So it's not bad. I mean, it's meant to look a bit older and used rather than decaling them. So here's the top side complete too. And I think that red paint turned out really nice. I pulled out the airbrush here to do the windows just because of the control. I didn't want to spray bomb this part. I mean, you could hand paint it if you want, but I just quickly loaded up the airbrush with some Vallejo black. And I'll have another video on how to mask canopy windows and windows, windshields, etc. for your cars and airplanes. So yeah, after they were masked properly, I just gave it 2 coats of Vallejo black. So that's what you're seeing now. That was the first coat, and this will be the second coat. And once those were in, I applied them to the decaled car, and I didn't do any of the decaling on film. But there she is. That's about 98% complete. Next, I wasn't satisfied with how the front clip looked. It looked way too plain. And on the box it shows the upper and lower grill there is supposed to be black. So I went ahead and cleared it a few times. And once it was cleared, I masked off the front clip there, the 2 grills, and painted it black. And what you're going to see next is me clearing it with some pledge. And that's how I clear my models. I didn't even mask the windows, as you see. And once it was cleared, I didn't want those grills glossed, so I gloss coated the model first, let it dry for about a day and a half, 2 days, and then proceeded to mask the front 2 grills there to get them flat black. And this is how my Rick Wilson looks complete. Red interior, and I'm pretty satisfied with how it turned out, although the decals weren't fun at all. I mean, that's what you get for a 91. That whole side, everything was just one decal here and there. But I was pretty happy with how it turned out, and I just love building these NASCARs, and hopefully you get some ideas on how to build yours too. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and learned a couple things. If you did, like and subscribe, and I'll try to make some more videos. Thank you guys. Have a good day.